Muy buenos días, soy Christian Müller, especialista en comercio de la oficina en Londres. Muchas gracias por conectarse a esta sesión, esta capacitación de hoy día. Les presento a nuestro director Ricardo Romero.
Buenos días a todos. Good morning, Gerald. Thank you for joining us this morning. Afternoon for us. Bueno, muchas gracias por participar en este esfuerzo que está haciendo la Oficina Comercial del Perú en Londres, con la intención de generar capacidades de cómo hacer negocios con este país. Cuando llegamos a esta oficina hace poco, o hace ya un año, una de las cosas que nos dimos cuenta es que el Perú o las empresas peruanas, muchas empresas peruanas, no ven al mercado británico como un mercado natural en Europa. Pero como ustedes saben, a partir del 1 de enero del 2021, la relación y las reglas y las leyes que aplican a esta relación bilateral terminan. Por lo tanto, consideramos importante que miremos a este mercado como un mercado de manera independiente. Y en ese análisis vimos que teníamos que hacer ese trabajo de ida y vuelta, es decir, no solamente persuadir a las empresas peruanas, perdón, a las empresas británicas de hacer negocios con el Perú, sino también a las empresas peruanas de hacer negocios con este país. Y la idea de esta serie de capacitaciones que vamos a hacer hasta enero es precisamente darles algunas ideas y expertise de cuál es la mejor manera de tener éxito en las distintas industrias. Hemos cogido varias industrias, varios productos. Comenzamos el día de hoy con alimentos procesados y quisiera presentar al señor Gerald Footer de Retail Mind. Es una empresa consultora que hace muchos años, él tiene más de 26 años de experiencia en la industria. Ha trabajado en Asda, una cadena de supermercados importante en este país, no solamente en el área comercial en términos generales, sino también como comprador. Entonces tiene una vasta experiencia, sobre todo en el tema de alimentos procesados y congelados, que es un poco lo que nos lleva a la realización de esta capacitación y de haberlo invitado a él a que nos acompañe. No quiero darle mayores vueltas a mi presentación, así que quisiera pasarle la batuta a Gerald Footer and thank him for being here this morning. And Gerald, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. Welcome everybody. I'll just share the screen so that we can see where we're going today.
I'm sure. You have it.
Okay. All right, welcome to all of you. And what we're going to look at today is working with UK retailers. And this is something that I know a little bit about. So I have been working as a retailer or in the UK retail industry for over 27 years. So I started off working at IKEA and Toys R Us, Habitat, which were non-food. And then I started work for Asda. So Asda are one of the largest UK retailers, and we're going to come on to them in a little bit. And I worked in different categories. So I worked in beer, I worked in grocery, and I worked in frozen food. And a large part of what I did when I was working in grocery was working with processed food, as well as in frozen. That was processed food. The categories were roughly £500 million worth of turnover. And I left there about 6 years ago. one of the things that I actually did when I was working in beer was actually, this is one of the brands that I listed. And I realized that afterwards that actually, recently, that actually this is one, it was a Peruvian brand. So Cusqueña was one of the beers that I listed when I was working. So I actually have got experience of working with a Peruvian brand already. So that is what I did when I was in Asda. And then since then I've left. And now what I do is I work with suppliers, because I know that working with the retailers is actually a very difficult job. And working with the British retailers can be very difficult indeed. So what I do is I work with suppliers to try to help you work better. And all the things that we do, we work on understanding the retailers, on negotiations, on selling skills, and generally consulting projects like this. Now, when you first start working with any of the retailers, when you first start looking at any market, the important part is finding the right retailer. So the UK food and grocery market is actually forecast to grow by about 15% between now and 2023. So that would give it a value of over 200 billion pounds. So that is according to one of the research industries. So if you have any questions at all, then please put any of your questions in the chat, or you can use the Q&A and Christian will then field any of those questions, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. One of the questions I actually had for you was actually, have any of you ever supplied a UK retailer? Because if you have, then you would know about the Big Four. This is what typically these four retailers are known as. They occupy about 70% of the market. So Tesco are the largest with about 27%. They've got an annual turnover of 53 billion pounds. Then it is Sainsbury's with nearly 16% with 28 billion. Asda, where I worked, and they have got about 23 billion. And then Morrison's. So it's about 17.5 billion. So over 70% of the market is in those four. That is why they are called the Big Four. Now, these four retailers, they have the biggest volume, but generally they are also the most difficult to deal with. And the reason why they are so difficult to deal with is because they are thinking about certain things. So at the moment, what we have in the UK market is we've got a price campaign. So it's a bit of a price war that is going on. So all of the retail, and it's not just the Big Four, are involved in a price war. So that means that every single retailer is fighting about price. So price is the overriding part of all of those retailers' strategy at the moment. And actually, I call it strategy, it's a short-term tactic. So that is one of the biggest things that the buyers, so before you contact any buyers, you have to understand, what are they thinking about? The other thing they're thinking about, obviously, at the moment is Christmas. We are 2 weeks away from Christmas, and these are the two biggest weeks for sales for the grocers. So that is occupying their mind. The other thing that's occupying their mind is Brexit. So what will happen as of the 1st of January? Will there be a deal between the UK and the EU, or will we revert to World Trade Organization tariffs? And if we do, what will that impact be on the British consumer and on the price of goods? The other thing they're worried about actually is any stockpiling. Are any customers stockpiling? So these are all the things. Before you speak to any retailer, you have to understand what they are thinking about, what is going on in their mind. Aside from the Big Four, there are 4 other retailers. I've just picked out these 4 retailers. So Aldi. So Aldi are classically known as a discounter. They are not a discounter, they're a German retailer. And they are actually determining what is happening in the UK grocery market. Aldi have only got less than 8% market share, and yet every single retailer looks at what Aldi are doing. So they're looking at Aldi for their price, because price is where Aldi absolutely have it nailed. This is what they have been focusing on. The other retailer I'll put up we might be interested in is the co-op. The co-op, well, the cooperative is a retailer who operate just in the top 10 with about 6% market share, as well as Waitrose. Waitrose are about 5% market share. The reason why I've put all these four, as well as Ocado are a purely online retailer. So they occupy about 1.8% market share. The reason why I've picked these four retailers separately is because these four retailers operate quite differently, I would say, to the others. So these four retailers look for different things in their suppliers. And that's one of the things that you have to think about, that when you're looking to work with any one of the retailers, what exactly is it that you want with your retail partner? Is it volume? Is it getting your brand into a new country? Is it long-term relationships? Is it tactical short-term buys? Or is it a market for private label products? Now, it's really important to understand what you want with your retailer. And it's also important to understand whether you want brand or private label. Now, if you want to enter the UK market with an own label product, one of the things that's really important to think about and understand is how long it takes to get a product to market. So in the UK, it can take in excess of 12 months to get a private label product to market. We always used to laugh when we were at Asda, thinking actually that what you can do is you could actually have a baby faster than you could launch a product. The minimum it would take for most retailers is 9 months. Now, one of the things you have to consider if it's private label is all the audits that go on. So before you can start supplying, you would have to be approved as a manufacturing site. That would require someone from the UK, from that retailer, to go out and to audit your site. Your site would also probably have to pass certain standards. Now, what we have in the UK, they're called the BRC, the British Retail Consortium. And what the British Retail Consortium do is they will audit sites and they will give it ratings. The minimum that any of the retailers would want would be BRC grade A. So you would have to make sure that your site and then the whole supply chain adheres to minimum of BRC grade A before you can start supplying any of the UK retailers. And it's not just the BRC grade A, it is then the retailers' audits on top. And sometimes you will find that those audits themselves can be even more stringent than those of the BRC. What you have to think about is why that retailer. And I say why that retailer because it is really important to understand the retailer, to understand their strategy, to understand what they are looking for. We know that what you are looking for is an export market. But if you don't understand what the retailer is looking for, then you might not be aligned with that retailer. You might go in with a proposition that is just not what that retailer has been looking for. You also have to think about, well, what product? So you might have a range of different products. So why that retailer and why that product? You have to think about those two things before you approach the retailer. And it's not a case of going approaching every single retailer, because I would guarantee that what you have is not appropriate for every single retailer. What you have to think about is actually what are you bringing? As a buyer, for me, I am looking for certain things at certain times of the year. So from my suppliers, what I'm looking for quite often is innovation. So what innovation are you bringing? What reason are you giving me to work with you as a supplier? And then after that actually is, well, where do you sit on the scale? Are you value or are you price? Now we know that for 70% of the market, price is the most important element to them. For other retailers, so maybe like Ocado or Waitrose or the Co-op, then the value equation might be more important. The ethics might be more important. It's really important for you to think about which retailer you want. If you have got innovation, is that innovation something that has been tried before? Why do you want to bring it to this retailer? What is it that they will be bringing? What is it that you were bringing to them? This is an approach that I saw too many times when I was a buyer. And actually what it was, it's actually understanding your approach. Now, are you going to put out a huge fishing net and try and catch every single retailer? Or are you going to be more bespoke in what you are looking for? What we talk about when we are, before any supplier approaches a new retailer, is a route map. Now, that route map has got different elements to it. So first off, there is the market assessment. So what is happening in that market and a much wider. And then it goes down to the retail, a retail assessment. So looking at the retailers themselves, understanding in the market, which retailers are having an impact, which retailers are looking for innovation. Then it's the route. What route are you going to get into? How are you going to get in there? Only then would you start thinking about the product. And when you start thinking about the product, you have to think about the price. You have to think about the place in store. And it's particularly important is, will there be any promotions that are attached to it? The last person you have to think about actually is the consumer or the shopper. What will the consumer or the shopper be looking for? The proposal that you put forward to your retailers, we would say should be a 6-point proposal. That proposal should be consumer shopper, the retailer strategy, the category need, commercial benefit, and implementation. Those are the things that you have to think about. So all of those are crucial to your proposals. The other thing, obviously, that you have to think about is the logistics. What are the logistics of bringing your product into the UK? And then how many depots will they be delivered to? So understanding the logistics and having those conversations beforehand, because those conversations, particularly the logistics conversations, they will determine what the price is. They will determine how effective it is to get the products through to the actual consumer. Once you've got all of that together, then you would make the contact with the retailer. Now, one of the things you have to be really thinking about is well, what is important to the retailer? How is that retailer actually thinking? What we look at and what you have to understand is that in the UK, the vast majority of retailers work in a short-term way. The retailers, the horizon that most of the retailers work to is very short-term. So what they are looking for actually is delivering the numbers that they are required to deliver in any 12-month period. Very few of the retailers at the moment are looking outside for long-term relationships. What you have to understand is that the retailers and a lot of the buyers in the UK are very inexperienced. The buyers in most of the multiple retailers now are more inexperienced than they ever have been. But the buying areas that they have are bigger and more complicated than they ever have been. So what you will find is actually that the buyers themselves generally are quite risk averse. So the buyers, when approached by somebody new, will really be questioning, is it the right thing to be doing? Now, there are some retailers who are more proactive and who will look at longer terms, who will think more strategically. The retailers that I've picked out here, Aldi, Co-op and Waitrose, are retailers who I would say are ones who are more likely to think strategically, to think about building long-term relationships. Now, you might query and wonder why Aldi would do that, because Aldi are a retailer who is focused purely on price. Now, what we know is that Aldi are purely focused on price, but they know that they can focus on price better by having longer term relationships. They are open to longer term relationships because we know that actually it's the longer term relationships that unlock the value. When a retailer looks short term, then value is not to be there, either for them or for you. So understanding which of the retailers you want to be thinking about is really important. The other thing that is really important is timing. So in the UK, with most of the retailers, there is very little change to their product ranges nowadays. So most retailers don't make many changes to their product ranges. They will make changes once, twice, a maximum of 3 times in a year. So it's only at those points that the retailers themselves will be looking to bring in new manufacturers. One of the important things to think about actually is, are you looking to bring in a brand new product, or are you looking to replace the supply chain of a supplier that's there already? If you are looking to replace a current supplier, then that can happen at any point in the year. But then what that retailer will be looking at will be price. So what is the reason that that retailer would want to move from one supplier to another supplier? Why would they want to take that risk working with a new supplier and manufacturer? So when I say timing is everything, you have to find out when the range reviews are taking place. So that is about getting in contact with the buyer or somebody else in the retailer in the category to find out when they'll be making changes to their product ranges. Because when you find out then you can start working backwards, because as we said, it can take 12 months to launch a own label product. If you've got a brand, then it depends on when the range review fits with that retailer. So these are really important things to think about before you actually approach the retailer. The other thing to really think about and to find out is understanding the buyers that you've got. So what is the buyer like in the category that you will be working with? Now, having worked as a buyer and seen what the buyers are like, and also now working with suppliers, I get to hear about what buyers generally are like. And that's why I put up that one with a child wearing the Harvard t-shirt, because the inexperienced buyers are dominating the UK retailers at the moment. So what they will not understand is they will not understand why they should work with a brand new supplier, particularly a supplier who's got a more complicated supply chain. So these are all the things to think about. Also, then what is the supplier? Is the supplier, if you've got a supplier, if you've got a buyer who is very much directive, they may well want to work with suppliers other than their current suppliers. So understanding what they're like. Have you got a buyer who is collaborative, who wants to understand? One of the most important things you think about, actually, if you've got a new buyer, how can you get them to understand your products? I think one of the things that has happened, and certainly one of the things that I would always do, is I would go and I would travel the world looking for new suppliers. Now, not many buyers nowadays are doing that. So because the buyers themselves aren't traveling as much as they used to, then you have got to think of more innovative ways that you can get your products in front of the buyers and give them a reason to want to work with you. One of the things you have to think about as well, other different types of buyers, is that all buyers are not created equal. They are all very different across the different retailers. It very much depends on what is happening at a more senior level in those retailers. How much pressure is that buyer under? Understanding the financials of the retailer is crucial to thinking about the pressure that that buyer is under. If a retailer is struggling financially, the pressures that the buyer are under are that much greater. The more pressures that the buyer is under, the more risk averse that they will be, and the less likely they are to look for new suppliers. So what you want to be looking for is the retailers who are doing well, and also whose strategy aligns to yours. What are you looking to get from them? The most important thing that you should be giving when you meet any of your new potential retailers is the passion. This is something that I know sets suppliers apart when dealing with retailers, when dealing with buyers. As a buyer, if I had a supplier who had a product that was exciting, that was innovative, that was interesting, that would add value, and I had the supplier who showed me the passion that they have for those products, that is when I became interested. If I've got a manufacturer or a supplier who is just coming to me with a route to market, and I'm another tick in the box, then that is something for me that then was a reason for me not to talk to them, because I knew you hadn't thought about me. You have to absolutely think about the retailer that you want to work with. Why do you want to work with them? The products that you are bringing to the UK. What makes those products special? What makes those products unique? Then put all that together into a very simple presentation which will engage me. What I am not looking to see is a presentation that is 30 or 40 pages long that tells me about all the different factory sites that you've got, the family history. I'm looking to be, why me? Why have you come to me? If you can get the why me part right, that is how you can start to engage better, understand, and be more successful when you are working with the retailers. You have to make sure that the retailers feel that you have chosen them. as the reason and as the place and the route for your products. If you don't make them feel special, they will find it something that they don't want to see. What I think will be good now actually is, because I think it's all very well for me talk, but also to hear your questions. So I see there's a question that's come up from someone actually said, how do you think Brexit will change the retail industry from the supply side? Will there be more interest in buying from countries outside of the EU? Now, we don't know, is the honest answer at the moment. It all depends on the tariffs. It depends on the tariffs that the UK will be facing. What we do know is that actually that there will be inflation in food. So that itself will be something that if you can help, if your products, then you can come and actually you are competitive, then that is something that will be extremely important to the UK retailers next year. So having a competitive supply base will be something that will be more important next year than probably many years before. And we know that the UK market is extremely competitive at the moment.
Jed, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I had a question myself. Trying to think in terms of what Peruvian companies or how Peruvian companies approach the market. In many instances, when you want to work with a retail doesn't buy directly to the supplier. They go through distributors. So if you could elaborate a bit more about those relationships, whether or not going directly through the retail or going through the distributors that the retailers work with. How does that work in the United Kingdom?
Well, one thing that we have, one thing that we have seen over the past probably 10 years is actually more of the retailers want to work direct rather than through distributors, because the retailers understand that if you work with a distributor, then what you can be doing is adding cost into the supply chain. So if you can get the supply chain effective from the country of origin to the retailer's warehouse, then that is how most retailers now would prefer to work. But what that might mean is that might mean that you have to have somewhere in the UK where your products are stored. So if you've got longer life products, then there are distribution centers in the UK that you would store those products, and then they would go from that distribution hub to the retailer rather than straight from your production site to the retailers. Because what you have to think about actually is, for the retailer, what is the lead time? The retailer really thinks about the lead time. How, from when they place an order to when that order comes into their warehouse, how long is that? So if it has to come from Peru, then I would imagine it will be coming by boat rather than by plane. So you're talking a matter of weeks for a product to come. Whereas if you've got that product in the UK, then you're talking a matter of days. So that is the big difference. But most retailers now would prefer not to work with distributors.
We have another question from Ana Lucia. Do you see some tendencies in the food category? Any trends?
One of the things that we are seeing actually is there is a trend towards natural. And we're also seeing more of a trend towards people actually cooking at home. So for many years, it was very much about ready meals, pre-prepared meals, but now what we are seeing actually is there a tendency for people to look at how they can cook at home. That is something that has really developed over this past year because people have been stuck at home far more. So now people are working from home. So they are cooking far more at home than they ever have done before. The other thing we're seeing actually is in some of the categories, food categories, is baking. So home baking is something that is really important now. So anybody who's working in the home baking category, if you've got ingredients for the home baking category, then that is something that really is important in the UK at the moment.
I had another question, Jed. Considering that the market and the way we interact with buyers and suppliers has actually changed significantly because of COVID, what would be the best approach for Peruvian exporters to reach to these retailers or distributors in general so they can have access to the market to develop, business opportunities? What would be the best way of doing that?
The best way to do that will be exactly as I just talked about before. So you don't change that part of it. You understand the market. You understand the products, how it fits. And then you will find out how you actually contact that retailer. Who is the buyer? One of the best ways that you can do that is actually by using LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is actually an area where I get a lot of my information on different buyers. So if you've got access to LinkedIn, then you can look and you can search and find out the buyer, who that buyer is for that category.
I also have a question, Jed. You did mention that there's a maximum of 3 sort of windows throughout the year when it's appropriate to approach buyers if you have a new product you'd like to introduce. Does that vary buyer to buyer, or would you say that there is recurring pattern with regards to those 3 windows?
I would say three is an absolute maximum. Generally, you're probably more likely to find 2. And what I would say is actually depend on the category, but actually it's normally in line with the seasons. So what you would normally find is you would find the first range review would be post-winter. So in the UK, that would be April, May time to get products in for the summer. Then the next one will probably be September or October for winter type products. So those are the 2 main windows. So that's how most retailers would work. They would work with a summer range and a winter range. The retailers look to have the minimum number of changes that they can in any of their stores.
Thank you. Maria Luisa has asked whether you could put your LinkedIn link, include that in the chat, please. And we got another questions. Besides the British Retail Consortium, are there other certifications for the UK market that is appropriate to us?
The certifications would very much depend on the category. It would depend on the retailer because each retailer looks for different things. So those are things. So what I put up on the now, you can see my contact details. So that is who I. So if you search my name on LinkedIn, then you can get me on LinkedIn. The QR code will take you to our website, and on that website you can then look at what we do and make any contact through that. So, but certain certifications very much depends. So there isn't, the BRC is the main certificate that you would require for the site, but after that, there are a lot. So I couldn't say specifically what each one would be, because you have to find out from the retailer which ones they are looking for.
But let me interrupt here. But if you could, let's say, would Peru exports, so processed foods, is looking to processed asparagus, processed peppers, processed artichokes. If we were looking into those categories, could you give an example of what kind of certifications are retail?
Well, the main certification is the BRC. So that is what you need. So BRC grade A, but this is only if you're supplying private label. If you're supplying a brand, then the certifications are not required in the same level. So it's only if you're working with private label.
There's another question as well from Jorge. Does Peru have any advantage in terms of tariffs compared to what is expected from the EU?
That I couldn't tell you because I don't know what the tariffs are. But also it depends on the product, because the product type, each product type has got its own different tariff. There is not one single tariff for any product. So if you've got frozen mangoes versus jarred peppers, the tariffs will be different. So you have to understand what actually is the tariff for Peru, if there is one, and then what actually is the tariff if it is with the EU. At the moment, between the EU and the UK, there are no tariffs. But if there is no deal between the EU and the UK, then they will fall to World Trade Organization, WTO tariffs, in which case prices will get expensive. So it's understanding the difference between those two.
If you allow me, Jed, I'd like to expand a little bit in Spanish, of course.
Yes.
Bueno, sobre el tema de los aranceles, la mayoría de los productos peruanos ingresan a la Unión Europea sin arancel. Como ustedes saben, lo mencioné al principio, si bien el Reino Unido se retira al 100% de la Unión Europea el 1 de enero, el Perú firmó un acuerdo comercial con el Reino Unido que se pone en vigencia a partir del 1 de enero del 2021. Por lo tanto, las medidas de acceso van a continuar. Esto se concluyó en mayo del año pasado, por lo tanto, ya ese tema está absolutamente cubierto. Entonces, no hay ningún peligro de que el acceso se pierda en esta relación que hoy va a ser bilateral y ya no va a ser una relación con toda la Unión Europea, ¿no?
¿Hay alguien más que tiene alguna otra pregunta? Por el chat lo pueden preguntar. Okay. Okay. We're just waiting if there are any other questions.
Ya, déjame a mí también. Ok. Bueno, en vista que no hay más preguntas, we want to thank Jed for his time and for giving us this information, which is very useful. Queremos agradecer también a las empresas, a los participantes que han estado acompañándonos esta mañana de ustedes, tarde de nosotros. La siguiente sesión que tenemos es el día jueves a la misma hora, a las 2 de la tarde, hora de Londres, es 9 de la mañana, hora de Lima, y vamos a enfocarnos en productos marinos. En este caso, la industria de los productos marinos en el Reino Unido por el lado de Perú está poco explorado, la presencia de Perú es casi inexistente, y nosotros como oficina comercial queremos impulsar este sector, porque no es un tema porque Perú no pueda venderlo al Reino Unido. Le puede vender muchas de las cosas que ya exporta al resto de Europa, pero el tema es que no se ha desarrollado la cadena comercial y es un poco lo que vamos a hacer en el 2021, es una de las prioridades de esta oficina comercial, porque claro, como oficinas debemos mirar en aquellos sectores donde hay potencialidad, pero que no, la relación comercial básicamente no existe. Ese es nuestro rol, abrir las puertas, que es un poco por donde vamos a ir. Y estas sesiones de capacitación yo creo que contribuyen a que las empresas entiendan un poco la dinámica del mercado y cómo es que opera un mercado que hoy creo yo que las empresas peruanas tendrán que mirar fuera de la Unión Europea, porque su dinamismo va a cambiar mucho, inclusive un poco mirando la dinámica de cómo se está dando el tema del Brexit y sin saber un poco si es que finalmente el Reino Unido va a tener un acuerdo comercial con el resto de Europa, queda un poco de dudas todavía de cómo se va a dar esa dinámica, pero nosotros creemos como Oficina Comercial que el Perú sí tiene una oportunidad importante y acá está la Oficina Comercial para aprovechar al máximo posible las oportunidades que existen en el mercado, ¿no? Si no hubiese ninguna otra pregunta, les agradezco a todos, o si hay una pregunta, me parece.
Sí. A María Luisa subió su mano. Le voy a abrir el micrófono. María Luisa, si tienes alguna pregunta, lo puedes preguntar ahora por el micrófono.
Buenos días, Ricardo. ¿Me escuchan? ¿Aló? Buenos días, ¿me escuchan?
Buenos días, sí.
Ricardo, buenos días. Excelente. Muchísimas gracias por la iniciativa de empezar a capacitarnos con el tema del Reino Unido. La verdad, a nosotros nos encantaría poder participar de este mercado y poder incursionar con marca propia como lo estamos haciendo en otros países. ¿Y qué posibilidades ves tú de entrar a e-commerce en Inglaterra? O sea, que Inglaterra sea también a través de, no sé si hay Amazon Inglaterra o qué otra e-commerce hay, para que sea nuestra ventana de ingreso y después sea mucho más fácil para las cadenas de supermercados que confíen en nosotros y ya poder entrar a cadenas.
Haz la pregunta en inglés.
¿Quieres que la haga en inglés?
Sí, para que Jet te responda, creo que sería más fácil. Porque nosotros podemos traducir igual, pero...
Ya, Get, es Get, ¿no? Su nombre. Get, good morning. Thank you very much for your presentation. We are very happy to start negotiations with United Kingdom. In the case of other countries, what we did is to start to sell in e-commerce like Amazon. Right now, we are doing that in Amazon, in the United States, also Canada and China. Do you think that it's possible that we start selling the products in United Kingdom by e-market? This is going to be like the window. Then it's going to be easier for the buyers to trust in us, and then we can go to the supermarkets. What do you think? I mean, we would like to sell, but our own brand, because I think this is the most important right now, the way that From Peru is helping us, creating a wonderful products with good presentation and showing our products to the world.
I certainly think that if you have already got a market and you're working with someone like Amazon in the US and Canada, then working with Amazon would give you some kind of opening in the UK because it is a very different way of working. Certainly we know that e-commerce is an area where we've seen significant growth, and all of those retailers that I talked about, with the exception of Aldi, have all got their own online e-commerce platform. So they're all doing that. But certainly if you would want to work with someone like Amazon, then that would give the UK customer access to your products and make them aware of your products.
excuse me, did you ask me something?
No.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was a question. It's okay, thank you. Do you think that is the best way to start to sell our products? First, start in an e-market and then go to the stores?
It very much, it depends on what you're looking for. So that's the most important. What are you looking for? Because if you start off working with someone like Amazon, then the volumes that you're working with will be very low. So if you want to get to come into the UK market and to understand how it works, to try, then working with Amazon will be a way of doing it. But obviously there is a cost to doing that. By working with any of the major multiples, then what you get there is volume. Because they are, as I talked about, it is 70, the big four are 70% of the market. Amazon for food don't even register with regard to market share. So Amazon at the moment are very low with regards to how a UK customer looks for food. So it's not the main place that they would go. So you could, by all means, you could work there, but the volumes would be low and you'd have to have somewhere in the UK where you will be storing your product as well. So you could then deliver it from that warehouse to Amazon.
And is there a possibility, we're doing that in the States, that find a distributor there in United Kingdom, and then the distributor can distribute our products to Amazon? I mean, which is the best way?
I'm sure there are plenty of distributors in the UK that would do that kind of service. Yeah.
Maria Luisa, can you tell us what are the products you're talking about? Because we don't know what are the products you're talking about.
I mean, are you talking about my product?
Yes.
Or, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, sal de maras. This is a salt from the Incas, Peruvian pink salt.
Because they're small volumes then, right?
Yeah, I mean, we start in China. Right now we are from Peru in China. We are in United States, we are in Canada, we are in Oman. And in all cases are the same. We are exporting small quantities just to know how is the market work. And I think it's a good way to start because we receive preparation with the labeling, with everything. And then when we are ready, I think we can grow, but we start with a small, I mean, less than a pallet, but it's, I don't know if it can work the same with United Kingdom.
Great. We have to finish because Jed has to leave by 3. So again, Jed, thank you so much for your time.
That's my pleasure.
Gracias a todos por participar. Como dije hace un rato, nuestra siguiente sesión es el día jueves para quienes que estén interesados en la industria de la pesca. Cualquier otra pregunta, consulta vinculada a esta presentación, ahí por favor nos contactan directamente. Este video lo vamos a subir a nuestra página web, probablemente en un par de días. Y nada, seguimos en contacto. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.